The gunshot that echoed through the Rocky Mountains on that bitter October morning in 1878 should have killed Grace Oliverson, but instead it only grazed her shoulder and gave her a reason to keep moving faster through the treacherous snow-covered pass. She pressed her hand against the wound, feeling the warm blood seep through her torn coat, and urged her exhausted mare forward through the drifts that reached almost to the horse's belly. Behind her, somewhere in the wide expanse, the men her uncle had hired were still coming. They wanted what she carried in her saddlebag, the deed to her father's silver mine outside of Denver, the mine her uncle claimed should have been his after her father's death 6 months ago. Grace had other plans. The wind howled through the mountain peaks, driving snow into her face so hard she could barely see 3 feet ahead. Her fingers had gone numb inside her gloves an hour ago, maybe 2. Time had become meaningless in this frozen wilderness. She had left Denver 3 days earlier with enough supplies for a week's journey to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where her father's attorney waited with the documents that would prove her legal ownership beyond any dispute. Her uncle had discovered her plan somehow, probably through the stable boy she had foolishly confided in, and now she was running for her life through one of the most dangerous mountain passes in Colorado territory. The mare stumbled, nearly throwing Grace from the saddle. She managed to stay mounted, but the jolt sent a fresh wave of pain through her wounded shoulder. Blood had soaked through her coat now, freezing in the cold air and stiffening the fabric. She needed to find shelter soon, or she would freeze to death before the hired guns caught up to her. The irony was not lost on her that she might die from the very mountains she had been so determined to cross. Through the blinding snow, she caught a glimpse of dark shapes ahead. Trees, she realized with a surge of hope. Where there were trees, there might be shelter from the wind. She guided her struggling horse toward them, praying she was not just seeing things in her weakening state. The blood loss was making her lightheaded, and she had to fight to stay conscious. As she reached the tree line, she heard it, a sharp crack followed by the thunder of something massive moving through the forest. Her heart seized with terror. Bear, she thought. Of course there would be a bear. Why would anything about this journey be easy? But then she saw it was not a bear at all, but a huge pine tree, its branches heavy with snow, crashing down directly in her path. The mare reared in panic, and this time Grace could not hold on. She fell hard into the snow, landing on her injured shoulder. The pain was blinding, absolute. She lay there gasping, watching her horse disappear into the white storm, taking with it her supplies, her bedroll, and worst of all, her saddlebag containing the mine deed. She tried to stand, but her legs would not cooperate. The cold was seeping into her bones now. That dangerous cold that made you want to sleep. She knew if she closed her eyes, she would never open them again. With every ounce of willpower she possessed, Grace dragged herself toward the fallen tree, thinking she might at least find some shelter beneath its branches. Her vision was narrowing, dark spots dancing at the edges. She could hear her father's voice in her head, telling her she was the strongest person he had ever known, that she could do anything she set her mind to. That determination had brought her this far, across half of Colorado, through mountain passes that made grown men turn back. She would not die here. She refused. Her hand touched something that was not snow or bark, leather, a boot. Grace looked up, though the effort cost her dearly, and saw a man standing over her. He was tall, bundled in a heavy coat, and wearing a wide-brimmed hat that was covered in snow. She could not make out his features clearly, but she saw his eyes, pale blue like the ice that was slowly killing her. "Help," she managed to whisper before the darkness took her. When Grace opened her eyes again, she was warm. That was the first thing she noticed, the blessed warmth that surrounded her like an embrace. The second thing she noticed was the pain in her shoulder, which had intensified into a throbbing agony. The third thing was that she was lying on something soft, wrapped in blankets that smelled of wood smoke and leather. She tried to sit up, but gentle hands pushed her back down. Easy now. You've been shot and half frozen. You are not going anywhere for a while. The voice was male, deep and calm, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or maybe the Arizona territory. Grace forced her eyes to focus on the man leaning over her. He was younger than she had expected, probably not more than 5 or 6 years older than her own 22 years. His face was weathered from sun and wind, but handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and those striking pale blue eyes she remembered from the mountainside. Dark hair fell to his collar, and several days' worth of beard shadowed his jaw. He wore a simple homespun shirt and suspenders, and she could see the butt of a revolver tucked into his belt. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Name is Adam Quinn. I have a cabin about a mile from where I found you. Been trapping up here for the winter season." He reached for something beside him and held up a tin cup. "You need to drink this. It is just broth, but you have lost a lot of blood." Grace let him help her sit up enough to drink. The warm liquid felt like heaven sliding down her throat. Only then did she look around and see she was indeed in a small cabin, rough-hewn but sturdy, with a fire crackling in a stone fireplace. Furs and hides hung on the walls, and she could see traps and other equipment stacked in the corners. It was the home of a man who lived alone and liked it that way. "My horse," she said suddenly, pushing the cup away. "My saddlebag. I need to find them." "That mare of yours showed up here about an hour after I brought you in. She is in the lean-to outside, fed and warm. Your saddlebag is right there." He pointed to a leather bag sitting on a rough wooden table. "Did not look inside. Your business is your own." Relief flooded through Grace so intensely she felt tears spring to her eyes. She had not lost everything. The deed was safe. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my life." Adam Quinn shrugged as if pulling half-dead women out of snowstorms was something he did every day. "Could not very well leave you there to die. What fool thing were you doing up in that pass in this weather anyway? Don't you know those mountains are deadly this time of year?" Grace bristled at his tone, despite the fact that he had probably saved her life. "I had no choice. I have to get to Albuquerque as fast as possible." "Albuquerque?" Adam let out a low whistle. "That is better than 400 miles from here, and winter is coming on hard. You will never make it through the mountains in the next few weeks. The passes will be snowed in solid by the end of the month." "Then I will have to be fast," Grace said stubbornly. Adam studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes penetrating. "Someone put that bullet in your shoulder. Same someone you're running from?" Grace hesitated. She knew nothing about this man except that he had saved her life, but something in his steady gaze made her want to trust him. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was the fact that she was entirely at his mercy regardless of whether she trusted him or not. "My uncle hired men to stop me from reaching New Mexico. My father died 6 months ago and left me his silver mine outside Denver. My uncle thinks it should have been his, and he is willing to kill me to get it. I need to reach my father's attorney in Albuquerque to finalize the legal documents that will make my ownership uncontestable." "And your uncle knows where you are headed?" "He must by now. He probably has men waiting in every town between here and New Mexico." Adam stood and walked to the cabin's single window, looking out at the snow that was still falling heavily. "Well, you're going nowhere for at least a few days. That shoulder needs time to heal, and the storm needs to pass. After that, we will figure out how to get you to Albuquerque alive." "We?" Grace repeated. Adam turned back to her, and for the first time she saw something that might have been a smile at the corner of his mouth. "You think I'm going to let you go back out there alone to get yourself killed? I might be a hermit, but I'm not heartless. Besides, trapping season has been poor this year. I could use a change of scenery." Grace felt something warm unfold in her chest, something that had nothing to do with the fire or the blankets. This stranger was offering to help her, to guide her across hundreds of miles of dangerous territory, asking nothing in return. Why would you do that for me? You do not even know me. Adam came back and crouched beside where she lay. His eyes were serious now, all trace of humor gone. My sister died 3 years ago because a man thought he had more right to her property than she did. I could not help her. Maybe I can help you. He stood abruptly as if embarrassed by the admission. Get some rest. I will check your wound later and see if it needs fresh bandaging. Grace watched him move around the cabin, tending to tasks with efficient economy of movement. He was clearly a man used to living alone, comfortable in the silence. She should have felt awkward, lying here in a strange man's cabin, but instead she felt safe for the first time since leaving Denver. The exhaustion that had been held at bay by fear and adrenaline came crashing down on her now, and her eyes grew heavy. Adam, she said softly, and he looked over at her. My name is Grace Oliverson, and thank you. Rest now, Grace Oliverson. We have a long road ahead of us. She slept then deeply and dreamlessly while the storm raged outside and the fire crackled warm in the hearth. The next 3 days passed in a blur of pain and healing. Grace's shoulder wound had been clean, the bullet having passed through the flesh without hitting bone, but it needed time to close. Adam proved to be surprisingly skilled at tending injuries, changing her bandages with gentle efficiency and making sure she drank the medicinal teas he brewed from herbs he had gathered during the summer. He never asked questions about her life or her family, and she was grateful for his discretion. Instead, they talked about inconsequential things, the kind of easy conversation that comes naturally between people who find themselves unexpectedly compatible. She learned that Adam had been born in Texas, the son of a failed cotton farmer who had drunk himself to death after the war. He had come west at 17, working as a ranch hand, then a trail driver, and finally settling into the solitary life of a trapper and hunter. He had never married, never even come close, he said. He liked the silence of the mountains, the honesty of animals who did what their nature dictated without pretense or cruelty. People, in his experience, were far less predictable and far more dangerous. Grace told him about growing up in Denver as the only child of a silver prospector who had finally struck it rich when she was 15. Her mother had died giving birth to her, and it had been just Grace and her father for as long as she could remember. He had taught her to ride, to shoot, to read maps and assay ore samples. He had treated her like the son he never had, never once suggesting that being female made her less capable or less deserving. When he died suddenly of a heart attack, she had been devastated, but she had not been unprepared. He had made sure she knew everything about the mine, about the business, about the legal complexities of ownership. What neither of them had anticipated was the vicious greed of her uncle, her father's younger brother, who had shown up at the funeral with a forged will and a hired lawyer. Why not just let the courts settle it? Adam asked on the third evening as they sat by the fire eating venison stew. The storm had finally broken, and through the window Grace could see stars emerging in a clear black sky. Because my uncle has money and connections in Denver, the judge is his friend. The sheriff owes him favors. I would lose in a Denver court no matter how legitimate my claim. But in Albuquerque, my father's attorney has documentation that predates my uncle's forged will by years. Contracts, deeds, letters of intent, all witnessed and notarized. With those documents, I can go to the territorial governor if necessary and have my ownership recognized legally. Then even my uncle's crooked Denver judge will have to accept it. Adam nodded slowly. Smart man, your father, making sure you had options. He always said preparation was the difference between success and failure. Grace set down her empty bowl and flexed her shoulder carefully. It still hurt, but the pain was manageable now, and she had full range of motion. I think I can travel tomorrow if the weather holds. Adam looked at her for a long moment, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. Are you sure? Another few days would not hurt? I have already lost nearly a week. Every day I wait is another day my uncle has to consolidate his control over the mine. He is probably telling everyone I ran away, that I could not handle the responsibility. By the time I get back, He will have convinced half of Denver that he is the rightful owner. She met his gaze steadily. I need to do this, Adam. I need to prove that my father's faith in me was justified. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Then we leave at first light, but we are not taking the main trails. If your uncle has men waiting, they will be watching the stagecoach routes and the major passes. I know a way through the mountains that will add some time to our journey but keep us well away from anywhere we might be expected. How much time? 3 weeks, maybe 4, to reach Albuquerque. The route goes through some rough country, and we will need to be careful, but it is safer than getting shot at on the main road. 3 or 4 weeks alone in the wilderness, with a man she barely knew. Grace knew she should be concerned about propriety, about her reputation, but she had left such concerns behind when she fled Denver in the night. All that mattered now was reaching Albuquerque and securing what was rightfully hers. If that meant traveling with a handsome hermit who had saved her life, so be it. Then I guess we should both get some rest, she said, standing. Adam had given her his bed while he slept on the floor by the fire, and she had argued about it for the first 2 nights before accepting that he would not be swayed. Adam, I want you to know how much I appreciate what you are doing for me. When I get the mine secured, I will pay you for your time and trouble. Do not want your money, Grace, Adam said quietly. He was still sitting by the fire, looking into the flames. Just want to see you get what is yours and make it to New Mexico alive. That will be payment enough. Grace felt that strange warmth in her chest again, stronger this time. She barely knew this man, yet she felt more comfortable with him than she had with people she had known for years in Denver society. There was something solid about Adam Quinn, something genuine that was rare in her experience. She found herself wondering what his story really was. What had brought him to this solitary life in the mountains? What had happened to his sister that still brought that shadow to his eyes when he mentioned her? But those were questions for another time. Tomorrow they would begin a journey that would take weeks, and she would have plenty of opportunities to learn more about the man who had decided to become her protector. For now, she needed to sleep and gather her strength for whatever lay ahead. She woke before dawn to the smell of coffee and bacon. Adam was already up, packing supplies into saddlebags with the methodical efficiency of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. When he saw she was awake, he poured her a cup of coffee and handed it to her along with a plate of food. Eat up. We have a long day ahead of us. I want to make it through Cottonwood Pass before dark, and that means covering about 20 miles of mountain terrain. Grace ate quickly, her stomach growling in appreciation. Adam had been feeding her well during her recovery, and she felt stronger than she had in days. Her shoulder was still sore, but the wound had closed cleanly and showed no signs of infection. She dressed in the warmest clothes she had, grateful that her saddlebag had contained a change of garments. Adam had washed the blood out of her coat as best he could, and though it was stained, it was still serviceable. By the time the sun crested the eastern peaks, they were mounted and moving. Adam had 2 horses, both sturdy, mountain-bred animals that looked like they could handle rough terrain without complaint. He had loaded the pack horse with supplies enough for a month, telling Grace that it was better to be over-prepared than to run short in country where game might be scarce and towns were few and far between. They rode in silence for the first few hours, Adam leading the way on trails that were barely visible beneath the snow. Grace followed, trusting his knowledge of the mountains. The sky was crystalline blue, the air so cold it hurt to breathe, but the beauty of the landscape was breathtaking. Pine forests stretched in every direction, broken by massive rock formations and distant peaks that touched the clouds. Eagles circled overhead, and once they saw a small herd of elk moving through a valley below them. It was near midday when Adam called a halt beside a small stream that was not yet completely frozen. They watered the horses and ate a quick meal of jerky and hardtack while sitting on sun-warmed rocks. Grace found herself studying Adam as he ate, noticing things she had not paid attention to before. The way he constantly scanned their surroundings, always alert for danger. The economy of his movements. Nothing wasted, everything purposeful. The calluses on his hands that spoke of hard physical labor, the thin scar that ran along his jaw, barely visible beneath his beard. "You are staring," Adam said without looking at her, and Grace felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Sorry, I was just thinking that I am very fortunate you found me when you did. Another hour and I would have been dead." "You are tougher than you think. I have seen men give up with less cause than you had, but you kept moving, kept fighting. That counts for something." Now he did look at her, and his blue eyes were warm. "Your father raised you well. He used to say that determination could take you further than talent or luck ever would. I suppose crossing those mountains was proof of that. I had no business being up there alone in a snowstorm, but determination kept me going when sense would have told me to turn back." "Determination brought you across the mountains," Adam agreed, "and I aim to make sure mountains do not stop you from reaching where you need to go." He stood, brushing crumbs from his pants. "Come on, we still have another 10 miles to cover before we can make camp." They rode on through the afternoon, descending into valleys and climbing back out, following trails that wound through forests so thick they barely saw the sky. Adam pointed out landmarks, teaching her to read the terrain the way he did. That lightning-struck pine meant they were nearing Cottonwood Pass. That particular formation of red rocks indicated they should turn west to avoid a box canyon that had no outlet. He talked about the land the way some men talked about women they loved, with intimate knowledge and deep respect. As the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of orange and purple, Adam led them to a sheltered spot beneath an overhang of rock. There was evidence that others had camped here before them. A ring of blackened stones for a fire, a stack of dry wood left by previous travelers. "We will stay here tonight," Adam said, dismounting. "There is good grazing for the horses in that meadow just beyond those trees, and this overhang will keep us dry if it snows again." They worked together to set up camp, the tasks dividing naturally between them. Adam tended the horses and built a fire while Grace unpacked their bedrolls and started preparing a meal from their supplies. It felt oddly domestic, comfortable in a way that surprised her. She had never lived with anyone but her father, had never had to coordinate her movements with another person like this, but with Adam, it felt natural. As they ate, the night settled around them, vast and dark and filled with the sounds of the wilderness. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled and the horses stirred nervously until Adam went to calm them. When he returned to the fire, he sat closer to Grace than he had before, and she found she did not mind the proximity. In fact, she welcomed it. The night was cold, and there was comfort in another person's warmth. "Tell me about your sister," Grace said softly. She had been thinking about his brief mention of her, about the pain that had flickered across his face. Adam was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he began to speak, his voice low and measured. "Her name was Alice. She was 2 years younger than me, and she was the best person I ever knew. Kind, smart, full of dreams about the future. When our father died, he left us a small piece of land in East Texas, about 100 acres. It was not much, but it was something. Alice wanted to make a go of it, plant cotton or maybe raise cattle. I went along with it because it made her happy." He paused, staring into the fire. Grace waited, sensing there was more. "There was a man named Carson who owned the land adjacent to ours. Rich man, powerful, used to getting what he wanted. He decided he wanted our land too, made us an offer that was insulting. Alice refused, so he started making things difficult. His cattle would break through our fences and trample our crops. His men would start fights in town, make it so no one would do business with us. Then one night there was a fire. Our house burned to the ground with Alice inside. The sheriff ruled it an accident, said she must have knocked over a lamp, but I knew. I knew Carson had done it, even if I could not prove it." Grace felt tears sting her eyes. "Adam, I am so sorry. I tried to get justice through the law, but Carson owned the law in that county just like your uncle owns it in Denver. No one would touch him. So I did what I had to do." His jaw tightened, and Grace saw the flash of something dangerous in his eyes. "I made sure Carson paid for what he did to Alice. Then I left Texas and never looked back. Came out here where land is bigger than men's greed, and a man can live by his own rules." "What did you do to Carson?" Grace asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. Adam looked at her directly. "I burned his house down with him inside. Eye for an eye, the Bible says. I figured that was fair." Grace should have been horrified. She should have been afraid of this man who had just confessed to murder, but instead all she felt was a deep understanding. She knew what it was like to have someone try to take what was rightfully yours, to face a system that protected the powerful at the expense of the innocent. She could not condemn Adam for doing what the law would not do. "Is that why you live alone up here? Because you're running from the law?" "No warrant was ever issued. No one could prove I did it, and I think most people in that county figured Carson got what he deserved, but I could not stay there. Could not live around people who had stood by and let my sister die, so I came here." He added another piece of wood to the fire. "Been here ever since, going on 3 years now. Never regretted it, not once." "Do you ever get lonely?" Adam considered the question. "Sometimes, but lonely is better than angry, better than feeling helpless. Out here I make my own choices, control my own fate. No one can take that from me." Grace understood that too. The need for autonomy, for control over your own life. It was what drove her to make this desperate journey, to risk everything rather than accept her uncle's theft of her inheritance. "Thank you for telling me. And thank you for seeing something of Alice in me, for giving me the help you could not give her." "You are nothing like Alice," Adam said, but his voice was gentle. "She was soft, trusting, believed the best of people. You are harder, more realistic. You will fight for what is yours, and you will win. I can see that." "I hope you are right." They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire burn down to embers. Finally, Adam stood and kicked dirt over the coals. "We should sleep. Tomorrow will be harder than today. We are going through country where bandits sometimes operate, and I want us to be sharp and alert." Grace nodded and moved to her bedroll. Adam laid his own a few feet away, close enough that they could talk if they wanted, but far enough to be proper. As she lay looking up at the stars that blazed in the vast western sky, Grace felt something she had not felt in months. Hope. With Adam beside her, she actually believed she could do this. She could reach Albuquerque, claim what was hers, and build the future her father had wanted for her, and maybe, just maybe, that future would include the quiet cowboy who had saved her life and was now risking his own to help her. The next 2 weeks passed in a rhythm of riding, camping, and gradually growing closer. They traveled through some of the most rugged country Grace had ever seen, places where the trails were so narrow they had to lead the horses single file along cliff faces with 100-foot drops. Adam guided them with absolute confidence, always knowing which way to turn, which passes were safe and which were too dangerous to attempt. He taught her to read the land as they went, pointing out signs of water, of game, of recent human passage. Grace proved to be an eager student, absorbing everything he told her. They talked during the long hours in the saddle, sharing stories of their lives. Grace told him about growing up in a mining camp, about helping her father pan for gold when she was barely old enough to hold a pan. She told him about the first time she went underground in the mine, how terrified and exhilarated she had been in equal measure. She told him about the Denver society ladies who had tried to reform her after her father struck it rich, how they had clucked their tongues at her unladylike ways and declared her nearly hopeless. Adam told her about driving cattle from Texas to Kansas, about nights when storms scattered the herd and days when the heat was so intense men passed out in their saddles. He told her about learning to trap from an old mountain man named Jeremiah who had spent 40 years in the Rockies and knew every plant, every animal, every secret the mountains held. He told her about the time he was treed by a grizzly for 6 hours, sitting on a branch with a broken rifle while the bear paced below him, trying to decide if the meal was worth the effort of climbing. They laughed together at the absurdities of life, and they were silent together in the cathedral hush of ancient forests. Grace found herself watching Adam more and more, noticing the way his hands moved with such sureness on the reins, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the way his voice deepened when he talked about things that mattered to him. She caught him watching her too, his blue eyes following her movements as she set up camp or tended to her horse. Something was growing between them, undefined but undeniable. Grace had known attraction before, had turned down marriage proposals from Denver's eligible bachelors, but this felt different. This was not about social status or financial arrangements or family connections. This was raw and real and unlike anything she had ever experienced. When Adam's hand accidentally brushed hers while passing her a cup of coffee, she felt electricity spark through her entire body. When he put his hand on her shoulder to point out an eagle soaring overhead, she forgot how to breathe. By the end of the second week, they had crossed into New Mexico territory. The landscape began to change, becoming more arid, the pine forests giving way to scrub juniper and red rock formations. The air was warmer here. The snow mostly melted except on the highest peaks. Adam said they were making good time, that if their luck held, they would reach Albuquerque in less than another week. They were camped beside a small creek, the horses grazing nearby, when Grace finally found the courage to address what was happening between them. The sun had set, and they were sitting close together beside the fire, shoulders almost touching. Adam was whittling a piece of wood with a knife, shaving off long curls that caught the firelight as they fell. "Adam," she said, and he looked up from his work. "What happens when we reach Albuquerque?" His hands stilled, the knife pausing mid-cut. "You meet with your father's attorney and get your documents. Then I suppose you head back to Denver to claim your mine." "And you? What will you do?" "Go back to my cabin in the mountains. Trapping season will still have another month or so left." He resumed whittling, but she could see tension in his shoulders that had not been there before. "Is that what you want?" Adam set down his knife and the piece of wood. When he turned to look at her, his eyes were intense, searching. "What are you asking me, Grace?" She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I am asking if you want to go back to being alone in your cabin, or if maybe you might consider a different future, one where you're not alone anymore." "Grace?" Her name was a warning and a plea all at once. "I know it is sudden. I know we have only known each other a few weeks. But Adam, I have never felt this way about anyone before. When I am with you, I feel safe and understood and like I can be completely myself without pretense or performance. I think you feel it too. I see the way you look at me." "You are right. I do feel it," Adam said roughly. "But Grace, you are a wealthy woman, or you will be once you reclaim that mine. You have a position in society, a life waiting for you in Denver. I am a trapper and a hermit who has nothing to offer you but a rough cabin and a hard life in the wilderness. You deserve so much more than that." "You let me decide what I deserve," Grace said fiercely. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses rough against her palm. "I do not want the life that is waiting for me in Denver. I never did. The society, the pretense, the constant judgment, all of it suffocates me. My father knew that. It is why he made sure I would have the mine, so I would have the means to live however I chose. And I choose a life where I am free, where I can be myself, where I can wake up every morning next to a man who sees me as an equal partner, not a delicate lady who needs to be managed." Adam turned his hand to grip hers, his touch sending shivers up her arm. "You are talking about giving up everything for a man you barely know. What if you're wrong? What if this feeling is just the intensity of the situation? The danger and the closeness? What if you get to Albuquerque and realize I am just some rough mountain man who was convenient when you needed help?" "Do you believe that?" Grace challenged. "Do you honestly think what is between us is just convenience?" He was silent for a long moment, his blue eyes locked on hers. Then slowly, he reached up and cupped her face in his hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "No, I do not believe that. I think you're the most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you dragging yourself through that snow, too stubborn to give up even when anyone else would have quit. I think every day I spend with you makes me want the next day even more. And I think I am terrified that I'm going to mess this up somehow, that I am going to let you down the way I let Alice down. You did not let Alice down. You tried to save her. And when the law failed, you made sure justice was done. There is no shame in that. Grace leaned into his touch, her heart racing. Adam, I am not asking you to promise me forever right now. I am just asking you not to leave when we reach Albuquerque. Stay with me while I deal with the legal matters. Give us time to see if this is real. If it can last beyond the danger and the journey. Can you do that? Instead of answering with words, Adam leaned in and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might break. But Grace was not breakable, and she kissed him back with all the intensity she had been holding inside for days. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she went willingly, pressing against him and tangling her fingers in his hair. The kiss deepened, became hungry, desperate, a physical manifestation of all the longing and connection that had been building between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Adam rested his forehead against hers. I will stay. For as long as you want me, I will stay. That might be a very long time, Grace whispered. I am counting on it. They held each other as the fire burned down, neither willing to let go, both acutely aware that they had crossed a threshold from which there was no going back. Whatever happened when they reached Albuquerque, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The last few days of the journey passed in a haze of happiness tinged with anticipation. Adam and Grace rode side by side, now hands occasionally reaching out to touch to confirm that the other was real and present. They talked about the future in vague terms, neither quite ready to make concrete plans, but both understanding that those plans would include each other. Adam spoke about maybe selling his furs in Denver instead of Santa Fe so he could be closer to the mine. Grace talked about hiring a manager to run the day-to-day operations so she would have flexibility to spend time in the mountains if she wanted. They were carefully building the framework of a shared life, one piece at a time. They had one close call with danger when they spotted riders in the distance who Adam thought might be looking for someone. They hid in a narrow canyon until the riders passed, pressed close together in the shadows, barely breathing. But the riders moved on without discovering them. And after that, the way was clear. On a bright afternoon in late October, they crested a rise and saw Albuquerque spread out in the valley below. It was a sprawling town built around the ancient plaza, a mix of adobe buildings and newer wooden structures. The Rio Grande snaked through the valley, its water reflecting the afternoon sun. To Grace, it looked like salvation. It looked, "We made it," she said, unable to keep the wonder from her voice. "We actually made it." "Never doubted it," Adam said, though his grin suggested he might have had a moment or two of uncertainty. "What do you want to do first?" "Find your father's attorney, I suppose. Get those documents." She paused. "And then find a hotel with a real bed and a bath. I am covered in trail dust, and I'm fairly certain I do not smell pleasant." Adam laughed. "You smell fine to me, but a hotel sounds good. Come on, let us get this done." They rode into Albuquerque as the sun was beginning to set, attracting curious looks from the townspeople. Grace knew they made an odd pair, her in her travel-stained coat, and him looking every inch the rough frontiersman. But she held her head high, spine straight, refusing to show any uncertainty or shame. Adam asked directions to the office of James Martinez, the attorney Grace's father had engaged. They found it on a side street off the plaza, a small adobe building with a wooden sign hanging over the door. Grace dismounted and stood for a moment, gathering her courage. This was it. This was what she had crossed mountains for, what she had nearly died for. Everything depended on what happened in the next hour. Adam came to stand beside her, and she felt his hand slip into hers, warm and solid and reassuring. "You have got this. Go claim what is yours." Grace squeezed his hand, drew a deep breath, and pushed open the door. The man who looked up from behind a desk was in his 50s, with graying hair and kind dark eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Can I help you?" he asked in accented English. "Are you James Martinez?" "I am." "My name is Grace Oliverson. My father was Thomas Oliverson. He wrote to you about securing documents related to the silver mine outside Denver." Recognition flashed across Martinez's face, followed by concern. "Miss Oliverson, we expected you weeks ago. When you did not arrive, we feared something had happened. Please sit down. Tell me everything." Grace sat, and with Adam standing protectively behind her chair, she told the attorney about her uncle's attempt to steal the mine, about the forged will and the hired guns, about her desperate flight through the mountains. Martinez listened intently, his expression growing more grave with every detail. When she finished, he shook his head. "Your father warned me his brother was trouble, but I did not imagine it would come to this. Violence and attempted murder, these are serious crimes, which cannot be prosecuted in Denver because my uncle owns the judge and the sheriff," Grace said bitterly. "Perhaps, but they do not own the territorial governor, and they certainly do not own the federal marshal. What your uncle has done is not just a civil matter of inheritance, Miss Oliverson. It is criminal conspiracy, attempted murder, and fraud. With the documents I have here, we can build a case that will not only secure your ownership of the mine, but also see your uncle in prison." Hope flared bright in Grace's chest. "You can do that? I can do better than that. Your father did not just leave me documentation of his will and the mine deed. He left me affidavits from every man who worked for him testifying to your involvement in the business, to your competence and knowledge. He left contracts showing the mine's productivity and profitability. He even left a letter to the territorial governor explaining his wishes and his concerns about his brother. Your father was a thorough man. Miss Oliverson, he made absolutely certain that no one could deny your right to inherit." Tears sprang to Grace's eyes. Even from beyond the grave, her father was protecting her, making sure she had the tools she needed to fight. "Can I see the documents?" Martinez pulled out a thick folder from a locked cabinet and spread the contents across his desk. Grace spent the next hour reading through everything, Adam looking over her shoulder. It was all there, exactly as Martinez had described. Not just proof of her ownership, but evidence of her uncle's forgery, testimony about his threats, documentation of every aspect of her father's estate. It was comprehensive and damning and absolutely perfect. "What do we do now?" Grace asked. "Now I send a telegram to the territorial governor in Santa Fe explaining the situation. With these documents, he will have no choice but to issue a warrant for your uncle's arrest and an order confirming your ownership. It may take a few weeks to process everything, but I promise you, Miss Oliverson, justice will be done." "Can I stay here in Albuquerque while we wait? I do not want to go back to Denver until I know it is safe." "Of course. I would recommend the Armijo House. It is a respectable hotel, and the proprietor is a friend of mine. I will send word that you are to be treated well." Martinez stood and extended his hand. "Your father was a good man, Miss Oliverson. I am honored to help you secure what he wanted you to have." Grace shook his hand, feeling lighter than she had in months. It was not over yet, but she could see the path to victory now clear and straight. "Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Thank you for everything." As they left the attorney's office, Adam pulled Grace into an embrace right there on the street, not caring who saw. "You did it? You actually did it?" "We did it," Grace corrected. "I never would have made it here without you, Adam. You saved my life, and now you have helped me save my future." "Our future," Adam said, and kissed her soundly. They found the Armijo house easily, a large adobe building facing the plaza. The proprietor, a round woman named Mrs. Armijo, greeted them warmly when Martinez's name was mentioned. She showed them to adjacent rooms on the second floor, chattering about the amenities and the meal times, but Grace barely heard her. She was too focused on the look Adam was giving her, a look that said he did not want to go to his own room, that he wanted to stay with her. When Mrs. Armijo finally left them alone in the hallway, Grace took Adam's hand and pulled him into her room, closing the door behind them. Stay, she said simply. Grace, I do not want to compromise you. Your reputation, my reputation can take care of itself. I want you, Adam. I want you tonight and tomorrow and every day after that. I am not some delicate society girl who needs to worry about what people think. I am a woman who knows her own mind, and right now my mind is very clear about what I want. Adam searched her face, looking for any hint of doubt or uncertainty. Finding none, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks. Grace kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands tugging at his shirt, desperate to feel his skin against hers. They stumbled toward the bed, shedding clothes as they went, too lost in each other to care about propriety or caution. When they finally collapsed together in the soft bed, Grace felt complete in a way she never had before. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it. This connection, this intensity, this absolute rightness of being with someone who understood her completely. Adam held her like she was precious, touched her like she was miraculous, and loved her like she was the only woman in the world. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Grace's head on Adam's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her back, and she smiled against his skin. I love you, she said softly. It was not a declaration that required a response, just a truth that needed to be spoken. I love you too, Adam replied, his voice rough with emotion. Never thought I would say those words to anyone, but you changed everything, Grace. You changed me. Good, because I have plans for you, Adam Quinn. Oh? What kind of plans? Grace propped herself up on one elbow so she could look at him. Plans that involve you coming back to Denver with me once everything is settled. Plans that involve you maybe helping me run the mine if you want. You know mountains and rock formations better than anyone I've ever met. You could be invaluable as a consultant, helping find new veins, evaluating safety. Or if you would rather keep trapping, I could come spend time with you in your cabin during the slow seasons at the mine. I am flexible about the details. I just know I want you in my life. However, we can make it work. Adam reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch infinitely gentle. You want me to give up being a hermit and join civilization? I want you to be happy. If being a hermit makes you happy, we will figure out how to make that work with my responsibilities. But I think maybe you were not so much choosing to be a hermit as you were running from pain. And I think maybe with someone who loves you, you might find that being around people is not so bad. Adam was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he smiled. That rare, beautiful smile that transformed his whole face. You know what? I think you might be right. I think with you I could face just about anything, even Denver society. Grace laughed and kissed him. Let us not get ahead of ourselves. We will start with Albuquerque society and work our way up. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, more content than either had ever been. The next 3 weeks in Albuquerque were like a dream. While Martinez worked with the territorial governor to secure the legal documents and warrants, Grace and Adam explored the town and the surrounding area. They visited the old mission church, walked along the Rio Grande, attended a fiesta in the plaza where they danced to music played by a mariachi band. Grace bought new clothes to replace her travel-stained garments, and Adam reluctantly let her buy him a new suit. Though he complained the whole time about the tight collar, they made friends among the townspeople, who seemed charmed by their story once word got around about the heiress who had crossed the mountains to claim her inheritance, and the cowboy who had helped her. Mrs. Armijo treated them like family, making sure they had the best food and the most comfortable accommodations. Martinez kept them updated on the legal proceedings, assuring them that everything was moving in the right direction. At night, they retreated to Grace's room and made love with increasing familiarity and deepening connection. They learned each other's bodies, each other's preferences, each other's secret desires. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, building the foundation of intimacy that would sustain them through the years to come. Adam told her things he had never told anyone about his childhood, his fears, his dreams. Grace shared her own vulnerabilities, her insecurities about whether she could really manage a mining operation, her grief over losing her father, her terror during those moments in the mountain pass when she thought she was going to die. They were not just lovers, but true partners, equals in every sense. Grace never tried to change Adam or mold him into something he was not. And Adam never tried to diminish Grace or make her less than she was. They respected each other, challenged each other, supported each other. It was the kind of relationship Grace had seen her parents have, the kind she had always hoped to find but had begun to think did not exist outside of memory. Finally, on a crisp November morning, Martinez summoned them to his office with news. Grace and Adam walked hand in hand through the streets, both feeling a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. This was it, the moment everything would be decided. Martinez was beaming when they entered. "I have just received a telegram from Santa Fe. The territorial governor has signed the order confirming your ownership of the mine, Miss Oliverson. He has also issued a warrant for your uncle's arrest on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The federal marshal is, at this moment, on his way to Denver to execute that warrant. It is over. You have won." Grace felt tears of relief and joy stream down her face. Adam pulled her into his arms, holding her tight while she cried. They had done it. Against all odds, against men with money and power and corrupt connections, they had won. Her father's legacy was secure. Her future was her own. "There is more," Martinez continued. "The governor was so impressed by your story, by your determination and courage, that he has written a letter of recommendation to the territorial legislature. He believes your case highlights the need for better protections for women's property rights, and he wants you to testify when they take up the issue next spring. You have become something of a symbol, Miss Oliverson, a woman who refused to be denied what was rightfully hers." Grace wiped her eyes and laughed shakily. "I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted to keep my mine." "Sometimes we become more than we intended," Martinez said kindly. "But you do not have to testify if you do not wish to. The choice is yours." "Can I think about it?" "Of course. Take all the time you need." He handed her a thick envelope. "These are all the legal documents you will need to prove your ownership. Keep them safe. And this," he handed her a separate, smaller envelope, "is a letter your father left for you. He instructed me to give it to you only after the legal matters were resolved. He wanted you to read it when you were no longer fighting for your inheritance, but could simply enjoy what he had given you." Grace took the letter with trembling hands. Her father's handwriting was on the envelope, her name written in his strong, clear script. "Thank you, Mr. Martinez, for everything." "It was my honor, Miss Oliverson. Your father was a good friend. I am glad I could help his daughter." They left the office and returned to the hotel. Grace sat on the bed, the letter in her hands, unable to open it. Adam sat beside her, patient and supportive, waiting for her to be ready. Finally, she broke the seal and unfolded the pages. "My dearest Grace," her father had written, "if you are reading this, then you have succeeded in claiming what I left you. I knew you would. You have always been the strongest, most determined person I have ever known, even when you were a little girl who insisted on following me into the dark tunnels of the mine despite your fear. You never let fear stop you from doing what needed to be done, and that quality will serve you well in the years to come. I am sorry I could not be there to help you fight my brother. I always knew Robert was greedy and weak, but I hoped he would have enough decency not to try to steal from you. Clearly, I was wrong. But I also knew you would find a way to overcome whatever obstacles he put in your path. You are resourceful and smart and brave, and those qualities are worth more than all the silver in Colorado. I want you to know that everything I did, every decision I made, was with your future in mind. I did not want you to be dependent on any man for your survival or your happiness. I wanted you to have choices, to be able to live life on your own terms. The mine will give you that freedom. Use it wisely. Use it to build the life you want, not the life society expects of you. But Grace, do not let the mind become your whole life. Do not make the mistake I made after your mother died, burying yourself in work to avoid feeling pain. Find love if you can. Find someone who sees you for who you truly are and loves you not despite your strength, but because of it. You deserve that. You deserve everything good this world has to offer. I am proud of you, my darling girl. I have always been proud of you. Whatever you choose to do with your life, wherever you go, whoever you become, know that I loved you more than anything in this world. You were my greatest treasure, far more valuable than any amount of silver or gold. Live well, Grace. Live boldly. Live without regret. All my love always, your father. By the time Grace finished reading, she was crying so hard she could barely breathe. Adam held her while she sobbed, mourning her father all over again, but also feeling a deep sense of peace. He had known her so well, had prepared for her future with such care and love, and now she had exactly what he had wanted for her: freedom, security, and love. He would have liked you, Grace said when she could speak again. My father would have approved of you. I wish I could have met him. He sounds like he was a remarkable man. He was, and he raised me to recognize remarkable people when I met them. She smiled through her tears, like a certain cowboy who saved my life in a snowstorm. Best day of my life finding you in that snow, Adam said, even if I did not know it at the time. They held each other for a long time, drawing comfort and strength from each other's presence. Outside the window, Albuquerque was going about its business, unaware that 2 lives had just been changed forever. That evening, Adam took Grace to a small cantina near the plaza for dinner. As they ate and talked and laughed, Adam reached across the table and took her hand. Grace Oliverson, I am not a man who has much to offer. I do not have money or a fancy house or important connections, but I have something I want to give you anyway. He pulled a small object from his pocket and held it out to her. It was a ring, simple and beautiful, made of silver that had been polished to a bright shine. Carved into the band were tiny mountains, a permanent reminder of how they had met and what they had overcome together. I made it myself from silver I have been carrying for years, waiting to find something worth making. I figure I found that something when I found you. Adam's blue eyes were intense, vulnerable, hopeful. Grace, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making sure mountains never stop you from getting where you need to go? Grace felt fresh tears spring to her eyes, but these were tears of joy. Yes. Yes, Adam, I will marry you. I cannot think of anything I want more. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her, which she supposed it had. They kissed across the table, ignoring the amused looks from the other diners, too happy to care about anything but each other. They were married 3 days later in the old mission church, with Martinez and Mrs. Armijo standing as witnesses. Grace wore a simple white dress she bought from a local seamstress, and Adam wore the suit Grace had bought him, though he still complained about the collar. The priest who performed the ceremony spoke mostly in Spanish, but Grace and Adam did not need to understand every word. They understood the important parts, the promises they were making to each other, the commitment they were entering into. When the priest pronounced them married, Adam kissed his bride with such enthusiasm that Mrs. Armijo had to fan herself and Martinez laughed out loud. Grace kissed him back just as enthusiastically, not caring who saw or what they thought. She had found her partner, her equal, her love. Everything else was just details. They spent their wedding night in the hotel room that had become theirs over the past weeks, making love with a new intensity born of permanent commitment. This was not just for now or for the foreseeable future. This was forever. They fell asleep as husband and wife, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and decided to build a life together. The next morning, they began preparing for the journey back to Denver. Grace needed to return and formally take control of the mine, to see her uncle face justice for what he had done. But this time, the journey would be different. This time, she would travel as a married woman with her husband beside her. This time, she had nothing to fear. They took the stagecoach route this time, no more hiding in the mountains. Grace was tired of running, tired of being afraid. She was Mrs. Grace Quinn now, and she was ready to claim her place in the world. The journey took 2 weeks, and every mile brought them closer to the life they would build together. When they finally arrived in Denver in mid-December, the city was covered in snow and decorated for Christmas. Grace felt a moment of trepidation as the stagecoach rolled down the familiar streets, but Adam squeezed her hand, and she drew strength from his presence. They went directly to the federal marshal's office, where Grace presented her documents and was informed that her uncle had been arrested 2 weeks earlier and was currently awaiting trial in the territorial prison. He tried to run when the marshal came for him, the deputy told them, made it about 10 miles before they caught him. He's been screaming about injustice ever since, but the evidence against him is pretty clear. He's going to prison for a long time, Mrs. Quinn. Mrs. Quinn. Grace liked the sound of that. From the marshal's office, they went to the mine. Grace had sent word ahead that she was coming, and the workers greeted her with genuine warmth. Many of them had testified on her behalf, and they were clearly pleased to see her return. The mine manager, a competent man named Peter Chen, who had worked for her father for years, gave her a full report on operations. Production had continued as normal despite her uncle's attempts to take control, and the mine was more profitable than ever. "Your father built something solid here," Chen told her, "and we are all committed to helping you keep it going. Welcome home, Miss Oliverson, or should I say Mrs. Quinn?" "Mrs. Quinn," Grace confirmed with a smile, "and this is my husband, Adam. He'll be consulting with us on geological surveys and safety measures. He has extensive experience with mountain terrain." Adam and Chen shook hands, sizing each other up. Grace could see the respect forming between them already. Chen was a practical man who cared about results, not social niceties, and he could tell Adam was the same type. Over the next few weeks, Grace and Adam settled into their new life. They bought a house on the edge of Denver, close enough to town for convenience, but far enough out that Adam did not feel suffocated by civilization. It was a simple house, nothing grand, with a view of the mountains that reminded them both of where they had met. Grace spent her days learning the business side of running a mine, meeting with investors and suppliers, reviewing financial reports. Adam spent his days at the mine itself, going underground with the workers, examining the rock formations, suggesting new tunnels and better safety measures. They were a team, each contributing their unique skills to make the operation successful. In the evenings, they came home to each other, to the simple joy of being together. They cooked dinner side by side, sat by the fire reading, made love in their big, comfortable bed. It was a quiet life compared to the drama and danger of their journey, but it was exactly what they both wanted. Grace's uncle went to trial in February and was convicted on all charges. He was sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison, a punishment Grace felt was both just and merciful. She could have pushed for more, but she found she did not want revenge. She just wanted him gone from her life so she could move forward. In March, true to his word, the territorial governor invited Grace to testify before the legislature about property rights for women. She agreed, but on one condition: Adam had to be there with her. Together they traveled to Santa Fe, and Grace gave testimony about her experience, about the legal obstacles she had faced, about the importance of ensuring women could inherit and control property without male interference. The legislators were impressed, and they passed new protections that would help countless other women in the years to come. As spring turned to summer, Grace and Adam fell into a comfortable rhythm. They worked hard during the week and escaped to the mountains on weekends, camping in the wilderness that had brought them together. Adam taught Grace more about trapping and hunting, and Grace taught Adam about business management and negotiation. They learned from each other constantly, always growing, always evolving as individuals and as a couple. In August, Grace discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with a joy so intense it was almost frightening. They had talked about children in abstract terms, but the reality of it was overwhelming in the best possible way. Adam became even more protective than usual, fussing over Grace until she had to remind him she was not made of glass. Their son was born in March of 1879, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Grace's father, and Adam cried when he held his son for the first time. Grace had never seen him so emotional, so utterly undone by love. It was beautiful. Parenthood changed them both in ways they had not expected. Adam discovered depths of tenderness he had not known he possessed. Grace found that she could be both a successful businesswoman and a devoted mother, that the two roles were not mutually exclusive. They hired a nanny to help during the day while Grace worked, but evenings and weekends belonged to family. As Thomas grew from baby to toddler, they had more children. A daughter they named Alice, after Adam's sister born 2 years after Thomas. Then another son, another daughter, until their house was filled with noise and laughter and chaos. Adam, who had once thought he would live and die alone in the mountains, found himself surrounded by family, and he could not have been happier. The mine continued to prosper under Grace's management. She proved to be as skilled a businesswoman as her father had been, with Adam's practical knowledge complementing her financial acumen perfectly. They became one of Denver's most successful couples, but they never forgot where they came from or how they had found each other. Every year on the anniversary of the day Adam found Grace in the snow, they took their children into the mountains and told them the story of how determination brought their mother across the mountains and how their father made sure mountains never stopped her. The children grew up wild and free, learning to ride and shoot and navigate by the stars. Thomas became a geologist, following in his parents' footsteps. Alice became a lawyer, fighting for women's rights just as her mother had done. The younger children found their own paths, but all of them carried with them the lessons their parents had taught them about courage, determination, and the power of love. As Grace and Adam grew older together, their love only deepened. They had weathered storms of various kinds over the years, financial difficulties and family crises, and the normal challenges that come with any long marriage. But they had faced everything together, drawing strength from their partnership. The ring Adam had made for Grace never left her finger, the tiny mountains worn smooth from decades of wear, a permanent reminder of where their story had begun. On their 40th wedding anniversary, Adam took Grace back to the place where he had found her in the snow. It was summer now, and the mountains were green and lush, with wildflowers blooming in abundance. They stood together on the spot where Grace had fallen from her horse, where she had thought she would die, where Adam had appeared like a miracle. "Do you ever regret it?" Adam asked, his hair now more gray than dark. "Giving up the easy life you could have had for this one?" Grace looked at her husband, at the man who had saved her life, and then spent 4 decades making sure she could live that life to its fullest. She thought about their children and grandchildren, about the mine that still operated successfully, about the thousands of moments, big and small, that had made up their marriage. She thought about all the mountains they had crossed together, literal and figurative, and how they had never once stopped moving forward. "Not for a single second," she said, and kissed him there on the mountainside, the same mountains that had brought them together and that had witnessed their love story from the very beginning. They lived out their remaining years surrounded by family, watching their grandchildren grow and begin their own adventures. Grace eventually passed the mine on to Thomas, who ran it with the same integrity his grandfather and mother had shown. Adam never did return to trapping full-time, too in love with his family to want the solitary life again. When Grace died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 85, Adam held her hand just as he had held it on that mountainside so many years before. And when Adam followed her 6 months later, unable to bear being without his Grace, they buried them side by side on a hill overlooking the mountains, with a simple marker that read, "Grace and Adam Quinn. She crossed mountains. He made sure mountains never stopped her. Together they conquered everything." Their children and grandchildren gathered at the grave, telling stories about the remarkable love story that had started with a gunshot in a snowstorm and ended with two people who had truly lived, truly loved, and truly made a difference in the world. The determination that had brought Grace across the mountains had been matched by the devotion of the cowboy who had made sure those mountains never stopped her. Together they had built not just a successful business or a large family, but a legacy of courage, partnership, and enduring love that would inspire generations to come. And in the mountains that had witnessed the beginning of their story, the wind whispered through the pines, carrying their names and their story forward into eternity, a testament to the power of determination, the strength of love, and the magic that can happen when two souls meant for each other finally find their way together against all odds.